Myfanwy, welcome to People in Legal.
Oh, thank you so much, David. It's great to be here.
I tell you what, we keep on wanting to have grab that coffee in Beecroft all the time, that wonderful coffee shop that you introduced me to, I think last year, and it's just circumstances have conspired.
Yes, I can see that people in legal and your other businesses have taken up way too much of your time to bother with just individuals like little old me. But that's why I'm super impressed to be here today because it's great to be in such great company as I've seen the other guests on your podcast.
Well, we're delighted to have you, Myfanwy. It's always been really enjoyable, sort of thoughtful discussions that are very valuable to I think that will be invaluable to our subscribers. So, look, do you want to actually introduce yourself to our subscribers?
Yeah. So my name's Myfanwy Wallwork. I worked in the provision of legal information for more than 20 years. And that has really allowed me to explore some really exciting new ways of providing information, both in terms of compliance, but also in terms of AI. AI is something that people talk about all the time, and you can see the value and you can see the benefits, but how do you actually make that happen for your organization? And that's something that I've been exploring recently in my career.
It's AI is very controversial.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, watching. I think I can say that I was around before the internet. Hopefully, that's not revealing too much. But even the internet didn't seem to have this pros and cons constantly being debated in the way that AI does. And I think that's because it is or could be so powerful, but we've already seen that there are some harms to both individuals and groups. And again, that's also part of what interests me about it is how can we actually use AI for the benefit of us as humans? I know that's something everyone's very concerned about, and there certainly are opportunities, but it's also understanding the specific characteristics of AI and how they can impact individuals, groups, but also getting the best out of it for your organization.
Yeah, look, it actually, well, I'd like to actually sort of, I guess, in depth discuss some of the examples and some of the findings you've actually got, and I guess that you found in the industry. But I wanted to sort of just go back a little bit with family and
Yeah,
talk about because actually we met when you were at LexisNexis.
that's
I'd like
right.
to talk about your career and how you got to where you got to today.
So I was at LexisNexis. It was really my first job out of university. And, I had such a fantastic career there. I was able to explore new opportunities, both in terms of commercial and managerial opportunities, but also for purpose. And that's really made a difference in my career, being able to find something I enjoy, that I'm good at, and actually makes a difference in the world. So those were projects that I worked on with the Pacific governments in terms of making legal information freely available, such as we did in Fiji, but also things like helping people understand what different regulatory frameworks mean to them. And that's another thing I'm really proud of in my career at LexisNexis is leading the regulatory compliance solution from a very small team with zero revenue, sorry, to, a multi-million dollar business that was had people across the world.
I'm very curious. How'd you do it?
Oh, it was easy. It was overnight success. No. I think it's like all product development. You need to understand what your capabilities and skill sets are as an organization and what your customer base or what your prospective customer base has as a need and where those two things match up. And when you've understood that and obviously looked around at the competitive landscape, it's then a matter of really bringing the right people together. And that's not just about technical skill sets. When you're working in a startup environment, you need people who are resilient, who can see the big picture. And I think what we all had to learn was what was the difference between something we could change along the way in terms of a product roadmap or the go to market, and what was a fatal flaw where we really needed to make that big shift. So I think that's something, all credit to my amazing team there. That, as I said, we grew from about 5 people to 80 people. And yeah, it was across the world. There are different challenges there as well, going from a very small team to a large cross-functional, multi-located team as well.
So you've done the really unusual thing of actually build a startup and a scale. You've done a scale up inside of a large organization. That is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, I think I don't know if every day I would have used the word fascinating. It's definitely challenging. It was fantastic to have the support of a large global organization like LexisNexis. But when you're looking for growth in an adjacent market, you do need that flexibility to do things a little bit outside what people are expecting. I think, and that again is what made that a unique solution. LexisNexis has some amazing platforms, content, solutions, but that was all in the legal market. So how did we translate that into something that's for an adjacent market and something not necessarily anyone within LexisNexis had experienced? So that took a lot of hard work, research, and really importantly, I mean, it sounds a bit basic, but everyone in the team had to talk to customers. This isn't, us sitting in an ivory tower reading a report and going out to market. It's really actually talking to people. What do they like? What don't they like? What can we do next? And really importantly, in a commercial context, what are they willing to pay for? And I think that's a really key question that's sometimes quite hard to answer.
So is that the secret sauce? I mean, I guess understanding that sort of product market fit, and I guess the value that the client base can derive.
Yeah, definitely. I think another issue, again, just referencing back to the to going to an adjacent market, is although I loved working for the market leader in the legal profession, it was quite different in the compliance market. If I can say that no one really knew who LexisNexis was. So it was establishing where we could promote our services and our solution in a way that resonated with the customer base we were aiming for, that went through the channels that our customers were already using. And that took a little bit of trial and error. And also, of course, when you're running a business like that, you don't have unlimited funds. So how do you use your resources, both people and costs, to be effective and really start testing how the flywheel is going to get going, how you're going to get from that zero revenue, zero customers to that multi-million-dollar subscription revenue base.
I mean, how do you build a business case? I guess how do you build a business case for funding? And I mean, because it's a really interesting sort of interesting challenge. I mean, you've got competing projects, there's competing business divisions, and you've got to build it's not like it's not like somebody pitching to a large organization. You're actually inside the organization. There's competing projects. There's a politics of what's going on as well, and you've got to build a business case that actually then gets you what you need.
Yeah, I think you've encapsulated all the many challenges really well. It's bringing back a few issues, and I think it's also really understanding what the organisation is trying to achieve. And in that case, it was growth. When you're a market leader like LexisNexis is, it is actually gets harder and harder to achieve the kinds of growth that meets your shareholder expectations. So there's definitely support for a new solution. But what I found, I suppose, really helpful is that revenue is really a lag indicator. That happens at the end of the cycle. So although it's really important, obviously, to keep track of how that's working and are you on track month to month, quarter to quarter, it's also looking at other kinds of indicators. So how's your sales funnel going? How's your marketing leads going to sales leads, going to demos? And just you're not necessarily going to know what the right number is, but what you should be seeing is a pretty positive trajectory. And you should also be able to keep track, I think, of that customer feedback so that you know how that's fitting in and that it will eventually drive towards that revenue growth that you're seeking.
So I guess actually, from a standpoint of organizations wanting to partner with larger organizations that are scale ups, I mean, you've got a really unique skill set to be able to actually like help them, or I guess help them understand how that relationship could actually work from a partnering standpoint, but also for a scale up organization as well that just wants to grow. You've got that skill set as well.
Yeah, and I think the scale up in a lot of ways had a lot of new and different challenges. And again, there weren't a lot of examples to follow. But I suppose it's going back to first principles and looking at, again, what's a small way you can test what will be successful in a different market. So because we work with legal content that is obviously very specific to a particular jurisdiction. So what is about the solution that would be common to different jurisdictions and why would they need it? So again, that's establishing really good relationships with the people inside the organizations, especially if you're working in a global organization, and really understanding again, what are they trying to get out of it? What are the challenges going to be for them? But then, of course, hopefully partnering with them to get access to their customer base as well.
So what kind of team, I guess, from standpoint of the skill sets of the team that you brought on board, I mean, what were you looking for? How did you attract them, and what were you looking for from those team members? What were the key ingredients?
Yeah, it is like it really does, I think, highlight the difference between working for an established mature organization and working for a more startup environment. So I led a cross-functional team of content, product, sales, and marketing. And it was really interesting to me actually that we did have people transfer internally in LexisNexis, but although they had the right technical skill sets, they didn't have that mindset that allowed them to deal with the ambiguity of a solution that was inherently risky, as all startups are in their infancy. And how did they feel comfortable committing their career to that? I remember someone in an internal meeting saying, "Oh, how did you feel when you risked your career to start regulatory compliance?" And it really took me back because I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize I had risked my career." All I saw was a really exciting opportunity to try something, and there was a certain safety I thought that I felt from the organisation that they were supportive of that attempt. I'm not saying it would have been an unlimited and untimed support, but definitely that was something that was important to get from both global and local leadership as well.
I mean, what would you say the defining moment was, Myfanwy, when, in terms of success? When did you know it was just a swimming success?
For me, it was because I could hear what the customers were saying and how they were using it. But definitely, there are some milestones that resonate in any organization. Is like when you hit your $1 million, when you hit a certain number of subscribers, or should I say, when you hit your first $1 million. And I think, again, also keeping track of what other business groups are doing. So, for example, we had a tracker to say which was the fastest growing solution, and we were the fastest growing solution at the LexisNexis Worldwide Group, which is, 10,000 employees, $1 billion turnover. So it really was a fantastic marker of what we were doing, especially, sometimes we're in the Southern Hemisphere. We underestimate the power that we can have and the impact we can have in a global organization.
I mean, I guess you really can't sort of underplay the value of stoicism as a leader in an organization like that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting. I've reflected a lot on, that line between helping people understand, what is important, that, there is not an unlimited capacity for throwing good money after a solution that just isn't working for whatever reason, but also, wanting to inspire people to try. And certainly, I think I can admit this, and probably anyone who's ever met me knows this. I do not have a good poker face. Like, so when we have had setbacks, and there were definitely setbacks where, we thought we were going to get this big customer at a certain time, and it didn't happen, or the business case that I'd put forward didn't get initially approved. There were definitely times when I found that challenging, and leaders commented on the fact that it was visible that I had found it challenging. I took that feedback on board, of course, but I think it was also important for my team to know that I cared enough about that solution and them to feel that as a setback. But all it did was inspire me to keep going. So and really prove what I knew was going to be a success.
I guess there would have been some sort of some uncertain moments, some dark times, and things like that. So, what inspired you?
So yeah, I would have to say the first year, we got to a certain number, but was very far off, I will say, the business case and the expectation of the time. But again, what I convinced myself, which I think is correct, is what I said before. The revenue was just a lag indicator. It was knowing how customers were receiving it. It was seeing, I suppose, the number of demonstrations increasing. It was seeing the response when we were out in market that I knew that we would get there. The only challenge I really had was making sure that we had enough time to get there. And I think if you haven't worked in a startup environment, you may not be aware of the time it takes to establish the solution in market, and again, how to know that that is happening without seeing the dollars roll through the door immediately.
I mean, what kind of, if you're a scale-up company that has investors, that's trying to keep the investors at bay
Yeah.
and trying to keep them happy and keep them informed and things like that, what sort of leading indicators would you suggest to scale-ups that they could actually talk to the investors about?
Yeah, and I mean, look, I'm not at all underplaying the fact that the investors will need a return. Like that That's without question. But again, what makes sense to them? You don't want to just have vanity metrics, but you do need a strong way to demonstrate that there is positive momentum, I think. So for me, that was definitely the number of customer visits that we had, the number of multiple customer visits we had. We looked at that by sector, by role, and we could demonstrate that we were moving towards a larger sales funnel and a larger conversion rate. So to me, that's I think what's important, being able to show that momentum.
And how did you actually pick between? I mean, there's different competing priorities from point of view of how the product's developed. I mean, how did you actually choose one over the other? Was it the raw nut? Was it I guess was it the did you have a way of measuring the customer's value one against the others or deal value? How'd you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, actually. I think that was one of the metrics. We didn't use it originally just because we had such a small customer base, but was looking at the average value per customer over time. And also looking at because we were part of a global organization, that average value per customer compared to other solutions as well. So we were able to demonstrate, I guess, that return on investment that we had, a limited number of sales, marketing, content investment, but the return was in many cases far greater than some of the existing solutions. So even though the overall revenue wasn't anywhere near it, we could show that we were going to be able to deliver that revenue over time.
I mean, Myfanwy, it's interesting. I mean, you've got this amazing skill set of product, of sales, of management, strategic. I mean, it's almost like an eagle like quality. You go from the macro down to the micro and see what's actually working, what's not working. I mean, how would you describe the way in which, how would you say your management style influenced the outcomes in the end?
This is such a good question. I mean, just to take it, I guess, back a step, I would describe my management style, especially in that environment, as really that founder-led approach. Like I was involved, especially very early on, in every single customer meeting. I reviewed every single content set that went out. I looked at every marketing piece. I had to be personally involved at that level in those initial stages. But that didn't mean that I thought that every opinion I had was right. It was also listening to my team and why they thought that and trusting their very different and very specific expertise in many cases was actually correct. I think it's really important also to have, although despite what I said earlier about negative facial expressions, I think it's also, look at the positives. I always said to my team, I don't expect you to come to work if you've won the lottery. But I do, when you do come to work, want it to be both fun and purposeful. Like we're actually building something exciting, and we're learning so much along the way. And although that purposefulness was very clear with my rule of law projects in the Pacific and with the Australian Human Rights Commission, I think with regulatory compliance, because it was something no one had ever done before, it just had a sense of excitement that I found and hopefully was reflected in my team as well.
Yeah, it certainly was a big success. I mean, I heard many stories about the rapid growth rate and some of the things you've done around the world. I mean, speaking of that growth, I mean, internationally, I mean, how does it how did the environment differ? I mean, what were the challenges when you were actually expanding this overseas?
Yeah, I think it was definitely how fast to go. Because, as I said, that approach that I took in Australia of being personally involved in every single conversation was not going to work on a global scale, and it didn't need to either. Like it was making sure we had the right people, the right partners. We relied really heavily on some really amazing partners, both in terms of software where people actually access the content, but also in terms of industry associations and people who were experts in the market to help not only, I guess, shape the product, but be able to help us promote the product to the market. So it was just understanding how that was different in Australia versus the other countries. Mainly, we looked at similar jurisdictions like common law countries, but we also looked at the US because it's the biggest market in the world. And a lot of our Australian customers found obviously the US market really challenging. And, as soon as I hear it's challenging for a customer, I've got to get in there because that means there's a great opportunity for us to deliver something that will actually help people and they'll actually use.
I guess sort of just moving on from it was an amazing experience you actually had with Lexis, but I mean, I guess some of the things you've been doing more recently are actually really interesting projects you've been working on.
Yeah, so I'm currently at the Human Technology Institute at UTS. It is led by three co-directors with really different experiences. You have Professor Nick Davis, who previously worked at the OECD, Professor Ed Santo, former Australian Human Rights Commissioner, and Professor Sally Cripps, who has a completely different background in machine learning and data science. And that combination gives them a really unique way to deliver policy, tools, training, and data science advice for organisations looking to safely and responsibly adopt AI. So the kinds of projects I've been looking at is what does it mean for organizations when they're buying an AI solution? Like, when you're looking at a contract, what should you see in there that will help you know that if it hallucinates or content is removed because of an IP issue, that you have some form of redress or that your system can still operate in the way that delivers efficiency. I've also been working with the federal government on the new voluntary AI safety standard, which hopefully will be out very soon. And that really gives organisations a methodical way to work through I guess, really standard governance issues, but that take into account the specific characteristics of AI. So there are like new kinds of risks. So like intellectual property, who owns the rights and the training data. There are risks that we know about, like privacy and cybersecurity, but they're obviously amplified by AI, for example, because people are much more identifiable in these large language models with so many data points. And really, I think something I want to emphasize that the standard does is really make sure you get that commercial benefit. I've read so many articles, oh, I saved 100 hours or 20 hours. And I'm like, I wonder how quantifiable or provable that is, because it is a big investment. It's not just a subscription, but what sort of training do you need? What sort of monitoring do you need? Making sure that all actually makes sense from a commercial point of view.
So, what advice would you give to an organisation that's sort of a small sort of startup to scale up legal tech sort of area with an AI type solutions? What kind of advice based on the projects you've been working on would you give to those guys?
Well, obviously, I would tell them to look at the voluntary standard when it's available. But I think, my previous work at regulatory compliance also really emphasized how difficult it can be for smaller organizations. There's already so many regulatory frameworks that they have to comply with, whether it's privacy or employment or work health and safety. So, really, what we've tried to do with the standard and with other materials that HTI has developed is how do you incorporate it into what you're already doing? And a lot of that AI governance stuff is very similar. It's, making sure you have a policy, making sure someone's accountable for it. But also, what are the differences? Like having an AI inventory, or what should you tell people about your use of AI? Because it's really a key principle that people know that AI is being used. And if they don't agree with any use or outcomes, that they can challenge that. You don't want to be Air Canada and claiming that the chatbot is a separate legal entity and you've got nothing to do with it. Just a case that's really taken everyone aback, but really underline the importance of good governance.
I mean, where does AI fall off the rails? Like, where is it really dangerous?
I mean, this is, where it is dangerous is such an interesting question. I put something on LinkedIn this morning, actually. That when you're doing risk management, you usually look at likelihood and impact as a way to prioritize the many possible risks that there are and the actions you need to take. And I think although there are some really existential risks out there to do with the environment or to do with weapons, I think there are some really common risks that we're already seeing materializing, like bias and discrimination. There's an ongoing case in the US where someone's brought an action against actually the developer of the system, not the organizations that are using it, to say that their system allows bias in the recruitment process. And I mean, that's something that can affect all of us. So I think that's where organizations should be thinking about where is a likely harm from AI and what can I do about it? And that's not only about protecting those individuals and groups, but again, it's about your commercial reputation and it's about the way that you can get people to trust your use of AI, which hopefully gives you a competitive edge as well.
I mean, it's also, I guess, one of the things that is interesting is AI in people's hands that are actually untrained. So I'm going to jump onto an AI engine, one of many, go and look for a document or go and type a document out and that sort of stuff, or ask for a suggested, you know, some suggested sort of model or something else, and then basically that result can be just in there's danger in transmitting that result itself.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. I mean, I think again, hopefully everyone's now aware that you shouldn't put sensitive company information into a freely available Gen AI solution. A very big tech company found that out last year to their detriment. But I think there's other things you want to think about as well. Like if you're working for the government, the questions that you ask might be indicative of a certain policy that should not be available or is not currently available in the public arena. Or even, looking at where you have paid for the tenanted version of Gen AI. So only it doesn't, nothing goes back to the company that developed it. It all stays internally. But just because something's internal doesn't mean that everyone should have access to it. So, for example, if you're using it for meeting transcription, don't forget that there were people who weren't at the meeting who might get access to that material. So if you start discussing something that actually not everyone should know about, make sure that you handle that within the limits of that transcription service.
I mean, how, and I guess it's a very broad question, but actually, how can AI make the workplace, I guess, make the whole legal industry and legal workplace better?
Yeah, I think, the global head of Thomson Reuters has already called out that there is no benchmarking for the legal industry in terms of what's a good accuracy rate, what's a good performance rate. And I think that is something that an independent organisation should do ASAP, because when you see the results, you have to decide like what level of accuracy is important to you, and does it make a difference if it's a different kind of matter or not? Is it okay if it's not accurate when you're just creating some marketing materials to promote your latest event? Maybe. Is it okay when you're giving advice to someone, especially if they're a vulnerable person? Probably not. And again, where is that commercial payoff? How much did the solution cost, and what value do you get? And I think for the legal industry, the other big challenge is, of course, that can be difficult for their business model. So they charge, for the time they've invested. So if AI does actually end up saving you time, does that mean your revenue stream's affected? So it's interesting to see how different organizations are handling that. So for example, if something used to take you 2 hours, and now you found that using a Gen AI solution, it takes 90 minutes. You can only charge for 90 minutes. That's what the solicitor's rules say. So you've lost half an hour of billable time. What does that mean for the value prop of the solution you're selling? So I think there's a lot of different issues that people are grappling with right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the approaches I saw at the Ulta show recently was people are actually charging for, I guess, AI processing. Uh, that's one of the things that I sort of saw. So they're actually assigning a rate to the AI, which is a very novel and interesting sort of way to go. I mean, I mean, the impression I got is, and as a user of legal services, I mean, get the job done at a rate which we've kind of agreed. But AI can make it more holistic and give you a better opinion. It can make it more holistic for the end user versus basically, well, let's just go and carve away at the price.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if it will, we didn't see that when legal materials went online. We didn't see lawyers charge that as a separate cost on top of their bills. But yes, I have heard of that. And I do wonder how the client's going to perceive that. Like it's definitely in line with transparency, but is it actually delivering what they need? And again, even if it is, how do you assure them that actually that response is the correct one? Because there is a lot of information out there that's saying that even within structured closed data sets, that hallucinations are still possible. So it's really understanding, if you're the client, what has the firm done to make sure that information is correct?
I mean, is it expected that, I guess, would it be a situation you could see that clients of law firms would just expect that the law firm have got AI in place? It's a commonplace, it's a
Surely.
standard.
Yeah. Yeah, I would expect so. I don't know what the time frame for that is, but you've got to expect that eventually they all have it, and eventually being competitors, some of them will start dropping off that rate. And again, what does that mean? I think there's also an interesting point, something I was reading recently, that usually a new legal tech actually helps smaller firms compete with larger firms in terms of resources. But in this case, because of the cost of the legal solution and because often the solutions have been focused much more on the larger end of town, that inequity might be exacerbated by the use of AI. So I think it's something worth looking out for. And maybe there's an opportunity for smaller legal tech firms to actually focus their products and services, on smaller law firms who might not be serviced by the big global providers.
I mean, where do you think the gaps are in that sort of, I guess, in the AI market? So in that sort of legal tech AI market, is there sort of gaps you can see that are kind of like that scream out?
I mean, I think, and when I was thinking about this, I guess, safe or responsible use of AI, I think I see much better results with things like drafting than I do with legal research. So it's thinking about what those tasks are rather than overall using AI for any part of the law practice. But I think, again, it's being able to help the customer come up with an accurate and realistic business case. Again, how is this going to actually justify the expense, and what do I need to do differently when I use this solution? As I said, it's not just a matter of typing in something and getting an answer. You do need to check it, and that is, again, part of the responsibilities, legal responsibilities of a lawyer as well. So really, if a company cracks that this is how it's delivered value and it's quantifiable and provable, I think that would set them apart. And hopefully also complying with safe and responsible AI ethical principles too.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, if I was a smaller sort of again, if I was sort of a smaller like startup, scale up sort of company in legal tech, take your solution to marketplace, I guess, are there three real nuggets of advice you give, three pieces of advice you give those folks?
Yeah, I definitely make sure that you're able to be transparent about what you can and you can't do. Make sure that the contract is clear about where those responsibilities lie in terms of the solution that you've developed, but also making sure that the customer is aware of their responsibilities. So there's no way, for example, that you can protect against an employee, inadvertently entering personal data that's then shared with the rest of the customer base. So I would really advise on making sure those responsibilities are clear, and also that the contract has really clear remedies for when something or can or does go wrong with the system. Something I've particularly looked at is, what would happen if the intellectual property of the training data was challenged, and if that was removed, how effective is the system? And again, I feel that that's, with the ongoing litigation in that area, I think that's an area that should be reflected in the contract. Like, this is the accuracy rate that we're saying, and if it changes, we'll do X, Y, Z.
That's very very sage advice. Myfanwy, it's been a really interesting discussion. I've got one fun question for you before we wrap up. It's been an amazing time with you today, chatting this through, and lots of value for our subscribers. Um, yeah, I speak to lots of people who are on the podcast. They travel a lot, that sort of stuff. I mean, if there's one place in the world you'd love to travel, your favorite place in the world to travel to, where would it be?
Oh, this is such a good question, and it really depends. Like, am I just looking for a beach holiday where I lie around and people bring me cocktails? Am I
Favorite
looking
place you've been, favorite place you've been, or
for
would like to go?
Definitely my favorite holiday ever was Turkey. I just found it really different to everywhere else. People were really friendly, an amazing history, and obviously for many Australians, a really strong connection
Mm.
with certain areas and the people as well. So yes, I would recommend Turkey.
Amazing apple tea. I can't go past the
Oh,
apple tea. The
and the
mint.
sour cherry juice.
Oh yeah,
Very
oh,
good.
goodness me. But just not the Turkish sort of Turkish barber experience. I don't think. I think it might give that a bit of a miss. Whereas
Okay.
Turkish, yeah.
I don't think I indulged in that
No. But I've
particular.
heard lots of stories about it. So I think it's just one of those things where you can be a bit sore and sorry. But anyway, one of those things. But family,
Maybe we
thank
need
you
to take
so
that
much.
offline.
Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate all the knowledge that you've shared with our audience, and been wonderful having you on. And looking forward to catch up very soon.
Thank you so much, David. It's been, as usual, a really insightful conversation. And yes, looking forward to catching up soon.
Brilliant. Thank you.